Slowly but surely, their attempts faded as they realized I was serious. For the first time, I focused entirely on myself, channeling all the energy I'd previously wasted on pleasing them into my career and personal growth. My fashion line thrived, fueled by a newfound creative energy I'd never experienced before. No longer burdened by the stress of supporting my family's extravagant lifestyle, I began to rediscover passions and dreams I had long forgotten. One evening, several months later, I received an unexpected call from my mother. My heart tightened briefly as old anxieties resurfaced, but I took a deep breath and answered calmly. To my surprise, her voice was different, quiet, almost reflective. "Haley," she began hesitantly, "I know I've made a lot of mistakes. I've been thinking a lot about how we treated you, and I realize now how unfair we were." Her admission startled me, something I'd never expected from her. I remained silent, allowing her to continue. "Danielle and I have struggled. It wasn't until everything changed that we truly saw how much we relied on you. We didn't appreciate what you sacrificed. And I'm sorry." She paused, her voice trembling slightly. "I truly am." I listened carefully, searching my heart for bitterness or anger, but instead found only calm acceptance. "I appreciate you saying that, Mom," I finally replied softly. "But forgiveness isn't instant. It took me years to see clearly, and it may take just as long for me to heal completely. I need this time to find out who I am without the weight of everyone's expectations." She sighed, sadness evident in her voice, yet she seemed to understand. "I know. I just wanted you to know I'm finally aware of how deeply we hurt you." After the call ended, I sat quietly, reflecting on everything that had happened. My mother's words were comforting, yet they couldn't erase the scars left by years of emotional neglect. Still, hearing her acknowledgement lifted a small part of the pain I'd carried for so long. Months turned into a year, and gradually I found genuine peace and happiness. I built new friendships, ones rooted in mutual respect and care. My career continued flourishing, bringing not just financial security, but profound fulfillment and purpose. Most importantly, I learned to prioritize myself, not from selfishness, but from self-respect. One afternoon, while giving an interview about my successful new collection, the reporter asked what had inspired such bold creativity and passion. For a moment I thought back to Danielle's cruel laughter at the restaurant, that humiliating night that had become my turning point. I smiled warmly, answering honestly. Sometimes the hardest moments of our lives become the most important ones. I realized that night that if I continued sacrificing my dignity to please others, I'd never truly live. Choosing to respect myself was the bravest and best decision I've ever made. When the interview ended, I felt a surge of pride. My painful past had shaped me. Yes, but it no longer defined me. I turned heartbreak into strength, rejection into empowerment. The family that once treated me as disposable had inadvertently given me the greatest gift of all, the courage to finally choose myself. Reflecting on everything, I understood deeply that family isn't simply about blood or obligation. It's about genuine respect, support, and unconditional love. It was a lesson learned through struggle, pain, and ultimately through freedom. Danielle's laughter had once hurt deeply, but now I saw it for what it truly was, a catalyst. She had intended to humiliate me, yet her cruelty had instead forced me to break free from years of toxic expectations, and for that, I would always feel a strange sense of gratitude. Standing tall, confident in who I'd become, I finally understood the moral I'd been searching for all along. Your worth is never defined by others' opinions or treatment of you. Sometimes choosing yourself is the most courageous and rewarding choice you'll ever make. What about you? Would you have walked away like Haley, or would you have handled it differently? As soon as I walked into the lavish dining hall, I knew coming here was a mistake. My mother had insisted on celebrating her 55th birthday at one of the fanciest restaurants in town, a place where each meal cost more than my monthly rent. But the extravagance wasn't what made my stomach twist. It was the fake smiles and uncomfortable glances thrown my way. My older sister Danielle saw me enter, and immediately her expression shifted. She always had a talent for making me feel unwanted. Tonight was no different. I approached the main table where my family sat, each person elegantly dressed and seated comfortably. Mom barely acknowledged my presence, giving me a dismissive nod as she sipped her wine. Danielle, however, didn't hold back. "Oh, Haley, what a surprise! Didn't think you'd actually show up." she sneered, raising an eyebrow as she glanced around the crowded table. Sorry, sis, but this table is reserved for family. Maybe you should go find yourself another seat. Her words hit me hard, and I felt heat rush to my cheeks. A heavy silence fell across the table as all eyes turned to me. I searched for an ally, just one face willing to speak up, but everyone conveniently avoided my gaze. My mother focused intently on the menu, pretending not to hear, and my cousins quietly whispered among themselves. It was painfully clear. I wasn't welcome here. It had always been this way. From childhood, Danielle was the golden child, praised for every minor achievement. Meanwhile, my successes were either overlooked or exploited. When I became a successful fashion designer, suddenly they remembered my name, but only as their personal ATM. Tonight was supposed to be different. I foolishly believed my recent success would finally earn me a seat at the table. But Danielle's laughter shattered that illusion in seconds. Humiliated, I forced a calm smile, stepping back quietly as if unaffected by her cruel remark. Of course, I said softly. Wouldn't dream of intruding. As I turned away, heading to the corner table at the far end of the hall, I could still hear Danielle's mocking laughter behind me. Anger boiled beneath my skin, mixing with a deep sadness I had carried for years. But tonight, something shifted inside me. This humiliation, this final insult, would mark the end of me being their puppet. They wanted to play games? Fine. Tonight I could finally play along, but they wouldn't like my rules. I sat down quietly, took a deep breath, and waited patiently, knowing that when the check arrived, their entire world was about to change. Sitting alone at the small table in the corner, I couldn't help but drift back into the painful memories of my childhood, the memories I'd tried so hard to forget. Ever since I could remember, Danielle was always the star of the family. She was Mom's pride and joy, showered with affection, compliments, and endless support, while I remained a distant second, forever chasing her shadow. One vivid memory stood out more clearly than others. I was 8 years old, excitedly rushing home to show Mom my first art award from school. Danielle had won plenty before, and Mom displayed them proudly around our home. But when I proudly presented mine, Mom barely glanced at it, simply muttering, "That's nice, Haley," before returning her attention to Danielle, who had just come home from a friend's party. My award ended up buried at the bottom of a drawer, forgotten like everything else I accomplished. As we grew older, this favoritism became even more blatant. Danielle would break rules and bend truths, yet somehow she remained perfect in Mom's eyes. One evening, Danielle snuck out to a party, stole Mom's car, and ended up scratching the side door badly. When Mom discovered the damage, Danielle effortlessly shifted blame onto me, claiming I distracted her when she parked the car earlier that day. Despite my protests, Mom chose Danielle's word over mine, grounding me for a month. Danielle just smiled smugly, and I realized then that fairness was something I'd never know in this family. Yet despite years of her, I still desperately wanted my family's approval. When my fashion career took off and money started flowing in, I thought things would change. Maybe, I thought, they'd finally see me for who I was and value me as more than just a shadow behind Danielle. But instead, the opposite happened. The moment I began earning well, Mom and Danielle treated me like their personal ATM. I paid for Danielle's luxurious vacations, Mom's endless shopping sprees, and even covered the mortgage on the house. Still, my contributions never earned me the respect or love I craved. They simply expected more. Returning to tonight, the stark reality of our relationship hit harder than ever. My family had gathered here not to celebrate Mom's birthday, but to showcase their lavish lifestyle, financed entirely by my hard-earned money. The expensive wines, and the elegant dresses, the lavish menu, all paid for by my generosity, yet I was still an outsider, unwanted at their table. My heart sank deeper when I overheard snippets of their conversations. Mom bragged about my latest fashion line to distant relatives, not because she was proud, but because it made her look good. Danielle basked in the glow of my success, accepting compliments as if my achievements were hers. Yet moments later she turned and mocked me openly, knowing I wouldn't fight back. The ultimate humiliation came when Danielle rose from her seat, looked directly into my eyes, and announced loudly, "Haley, this table is for family. You're not invited. Find somewhere else to sit." Her words echoed painfully through the dining room, silencing every conversation. Heat burned my cheeks as shame and anger overwhelmed me. Every eye turned to me, yet not one voice spoke up in my defense. Even Mom looked away, pretending not to notice, quietly condoning Danielle's cruelty once again. In that moment, I understood something clearly. I was nothing to them. I was merely a tool, a convenient financial resource they could exploit without consequence. As humiliation threatened to break me, something deep inside finally snapped into place. Tonight, I would no longer be their quiet victim. Danielle had unknowingly crossed the line, and soon she'd discover exactly what happens when you push someone too far. I sat silently at the small corner table, forcing a calm expression onto my face. But beneath that composed mask, a storm was raging, fierce and unrelenting. Danielle's cruel laughter echoed endlessly in my ears, and each mocking word replayed itself, carving deeper wounds into my heart. I had always managed to endure their cruelty quietly, convincing myself that keeping the peace mattered more than my own dignity. But tonight felt different. My mother's laughter rang out across the restaurant, joining Danielle's as they exchanged playful jokes, happily ignoring my isolation. Watching them, the painful realization settled over me. I had wasted so much of my life desperately seeking approval that would never come. How many nights had I spent working tirelessly, missing out on friendships, relationships, and genuine happiness, all because I believed my family's validation was the ultimate prize? Suddenly, memories of past humiliations flooded my mind, each sharper and more painful than the last. I remembered vividly my college graduation day, how I had searched the crowd, hoping to find pride on my mother's face, only to find empty seats where my family should have been. Later, when Danielle graduated, they threw a lavish party celebrating her accomplishment. I paid for that celebration. Not one person said thank you. Another moment rose sharply, the night Danielle cried hysterically because she couldn't afford her dream wedding dress. My mother guilted me mercilessly, accusing me of being selfish until I finally gave in. Danielle wore that beautiful gown proudly, never once acknowledging my sacrifice. I had financed their dreams while silently burying mine. All I ever wanted was to be seen, valued, appreciated, but I had been invisible all along. Each memory tore through me and tears burned the corners of my eyes. Yet this sadness quickly gave way to something else. Anger. Not the explosive, shouting kind, but a slow, burning, empowering fire that illuminated truths I'd long avoided. Why had I let this continue for so long? Why had I believed that love had to be earned through sacrifice and silence? I had spent years accepting their disrespect, funding their happiness while denying my own. And tonight, they'd finally crossed a line I couldn't ignore. Danielle's cruel dismissal wasn't just an insult. It was a liberation. This thought sparked something deep within me. For the first time, clarity washed away the years of confusion and doubt. The choice was suddenly simple. I didn't owe them my dignity, my money, or my silence. The burden I'd willingly carried for years lifted from my shoulders, leaving behind an unfamiliar but exhilarating freedom. Taking a deep, steadying breath, I stood up calmly from the small, isolated table, my legs feeling surprisingly strong beneath me. Danielle and my mother glanced in my direction, amusement fading into surprise as they saw me move. Ignoring their questioning stares, I slowly walked toward the exit, deliberately distancing myself from their cruelty. As I passed their table, Danielle smirked, confident I'd break down and apologize as usual, but I didn't even glance her way. My eyes stayed forward, my head held high. I found another empty table near the door and quietly took a seat. This simple act was more than just a change of seats. It was my silent declaration of independence. Sitting there, alone but no longer defeated, I made a quiet but unwavering promise to myself. This ends tonight. I will never again let them dictate my worth. And in that powerful moment of self-realization, I felt truly free for the first time. Danielle had unknowingly sparked the most profound transformations of my life, and soon she had come to deeply regret her cruelty. From my new table near the door, I watched the rest of the dinner unfold with newfound detachment. Danielle continued chatting animatedly, casting occasional glances in my direction, clearly irritated by my calmness. My mother, uncomfortable with the sudden tension, kept forcing awkward laughter, desperate to pretend everything was fine. But their pretense was fading fast. When the waiter approached their table, gently placing the leather-bound check holder in front of Danielle, she instinctively turned her head toward me, expecting me to quietly handle it as usual. But this time, I simply held her gaze, unwavering and unresponsive. The seconds ticked by in agonizing silence. Danielle's carefully maintained confidence wavered, her smile faltering as she realized I wasn't going to bail her out this time. Her face paled visibly, panic creeping into her eyes as she glanced around nervously. "Haley," Danielle finally called out, forcing an artificial sweetness into her voice. "Could you come here for a moment?" I didn't move. Instead, I spoke calmly from where I sat, just loud enough for those nearby to hear clearly. "I thought you made it very clear that I'm not family tonight, Danielle. If that's true, why would I be responsible for the family's bill?" Heads turned curiously toward our tables. Danielle's cheeks flushed deep red, so embarrassment flashing across her features. "This isn't funny, Haley," she hissed, struggling to keep her voice low. "Quit acting like a child and come pay the check." "No," I said gently yet firmly. "Actually, I think tonight's the first time I've ever truly acted like an adult. I've spent my entire life supporting people who openly treat me like garbage. That ends now." My mother's eyes widened in disbelief, panic quickly overtaking her embarrassment. "Haley, think about what you're doing," she warned, a hint of fear in her voice. "We're your family." I shook my head calmly, addressing her directly. "You're right, Mom. You're my family, and that makes everything even sadder. I spent my entire life hoping you'd see me as more than an ATM, hoping you'd love me for who I am, not for what I could provide. But tonight, Danielle made it crystal clear exactly what I mean to all of you." Danielle opened her mouth to interrupt, but I raised my hand gently, cutting her off before she could speak. "I won't pay for your happiness anymore. I've canceled your credit cards, and the payments on the mortgage, and your extravagant lifestyles end tonight. Maybe now you'll learn what it's like to stand on your own." Danielle's mouth dropped open, panic clearly visible. She glanced desperately at our mother, who was sitting frozen, eyes wide with shock. "You can't do this!" Danielle cried, no longer bothering to hide her fear. "We depend on you." My eyes softened slightly, the years of pain fading into quiet resolve. "That's exactly the problem, Danielle. You depend on me, but you've never respected me. I've always been disposable until now. I'm finally doing what's best for me, and you can finally learn to live with your own choices." I stood slowly, pushing my chair neatly into place, and turned to leave. Danielle sat speechless, shock written clearly across her face, the full weight of reality sinking in. My mother remained silent, tears forming quietly in her eyes, perhaps finally realizing the depth of her failure. Walking toward the door, my steps felt lighter, my heart free from the chains I'd allowed them to place upon me. I stepped outside into the crisp night air, feeling an overwhelming sense of liberation. Tonight wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming the respect and dignity I'd long denied myself. For the first time, my future stretched before me, without limitations. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I'd never felt more empowered. Danielle's cruelty had unintentionally gifted me the strength to break free, and I promised myself I'd never again sacrifice my worth for anyone else's comfort. Walking away from the restaurant that night, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. True freedom. The weight of decades spent trying to please a family that never valued me was finally gone. It was an unfamiliar feeling, exhilarating yet oddly peaceful. Over the next few weeks, I stepped into a completely new chapter of my life. At first, it wasn't easy. Every call from my mother or Danielle was a painful reminder of the emotional manipulation I'd endured. Their messages ranged from anger to pleading, guilt-tripping me into reconsidering my decision. But each time my phone buzzed, my resolve only strengthened. I knew if I gave in now, I'd fall back into the same toxic patterns I'd worked so hard to escape.